Olá, pessoal. Boa noite. A gente está começando agora a segunda semana de webinários. Essa série se chama do pré ao pós-tratamento, pesquisas para o avanço do biogás. Essa série de webinários é uma parceria entre a UTFPR e o CIBiogás. Na semana passada a gente teve a primeira semana, né? Nós falamos sobre o pré-tratamento de substratos lignocelulósicos. Essa apresentação da semana passada, ela já está disponível no canal do CIBiogás, no YouTube, é de livre acesso, então todo mundo pode só entrar no canal do YouTube, acessar lá e pode assistir a palestra. Hoje a gente vai receber o professor Dr. Prasad Kaparaju, da Griffith University, da Austrália. A palestra do professor Prasad se chama Produção de Biogás em Rota Seca. Antes da gente iniciar a fala do professor Prasad, eu queria passar algumas informações, relembrar que essa série de webinars, ela tem como objetivo abordar alguns assuntos do nosso curso de especialização em tecnologias da cadeia produtiva do biogás. Esse curso é realizado pela UTFPR, com uma importante parceria histórica, parceria com o CIBiogás. Fomos parceiros desde a primeira turma, e agora a gente está lançando a segunda turma do curso. Os palestrantes desse webinar são principalmente professores do nosso curso, e alguns parceiros internacionais, como é o caso do Dr. Prasad, do nosso grupo de pesquisa em tecnologias de produção e purificação de biogás, da UTFPR de Medianeira. O curso ele é ofertado na modalidade à distância. É importante citar que nós teremos alguns encontros presenciais para realização de provas, visitas técnicas. A gente promove também debates com pesquisadores, com produtores de biogás, com o pessoal que está bastante envolvido com a temática. Nós estamos ofertando 35 vagas nessa nova turma. A gente tem alguns links, eu vou pedir para o Bruno, que está dando o nosso suporte pelo YouTube, para que ele coloque os links. O edital do curso está disponível no portal da UTFPR, o Bruno vai colocar ali nos comentários. Nós também temos um link do CIBiogás, então ali a gente consegue colocar algumas informações a mais, feedback de alunos, fotos de algumas visitas que a gente fez, palestras da primeira turma. E também tem o e-mail, para quem tiver alguma dúvida específica, nós temos o e-mail esp.biogás.tfpr@gmail.com. Por mais que vocês consigam acessar o edital agora, vale lembrar que as inscrições elas iniciam no dia 3 de agosto e vão até o final de novembro, então tem bastante tempo para o pessoal acessar as informações do curso. O curso efetivamente começa em fevereiro do ano que vem, de 2021. A gente espera que até lá todo esse efeito da pandemia já tenha passado, né? E o curso se encerra em fevereiro de 2022. Então, o objetivo é criar um curso de especialização em no máximo um ano, né? No edital é possível encontrar, além dessas datas, os critérios de seleção. Vale a pena ressaltar que as áreas não são excludentes, né? Então a gente já teve aluno de engenharia ambiental, química, civil, pessoal da biologia, do direito, da administração. Então o objetivo do curso é levar conhecimento a todas as áreas da cadeia produtiva do biogás, né? O Bruno vai colocar então os nossos contatos. Falando um pouco sobre o professor Kaparaju, ele tem mais de 20 anos de experiência em pesquisa sobre biotecnologia ambiental e gestão de resíduos. As pesquisas do professor estão relacionadas à área de biocombustíveis, gestão anaeróbia, pré-tratamento da biomassa e também purificação do biogás. O professor trabalhou como professor e pesquisador na Finlândia, na Dinamarca, foi professor visitante no Laboratório de Biotecnologia Ambiental do Instituto Nacional de Pesquisas Agronômicas da França e também da Universidade do Arizona, nos Estados Unidos. O professor é membro da Energia Austrália e também membro da Força-Tarefa de Gestão de Resíduos e Biogás da Austrália. E atualmente o professor Kaparaju é professor associado da Griffith University. Eu tive a grande oportunidade de trabalhar com o professor Kaparaju nos últimos 12 meses. Fiquei em Griffith trabalhando com ele no laboratório de biomassa e biotecnologia. Alguns dos resultados que o professor vai apresentar hoje fazem parte dos estudos que a gente desenvolveu em parceria lá. E eu tenho certeza aí que com a grande experiência do professor ele vai contribuir bastante para o crescimento aí do conhecimento que a gente está divulgando desde a primeira palestra. Professor Prasad, it's really a pleasure for us to have you here. This is a sequence of actions in collaboration that we started a year ago, and I'm sure this is the beginning of several partnerships between Brazil and Australia. We are creating now to increase the development of biogas in both countries. I wish you a good speech during the next 30 to 40 minutes.
Thank you, Tiago, for the introduction and generous introduction. And good evening, everyone, for attending this webinar series. And as Tiago has said, that we are in Griffith University, so it is located in Australia. So I would like to talk to you about my research areas and then what we are doing in the space of biogas production, and then also about some of the anaerobic dry fermentation processes. So Griffith, as you know, it is one of the top 10 universities in Australia, and you can see that the Griffith University is established in 1975. And if somebody doesn't know where we are located, so here is the Australian map, and you can see that we are located on the eastern coast of Australia, so in Brisbane, and that's the Queensland, the state where we are. Now, Griffith University has 5 physical campuses. So they are located in Nathan, Mount Gravatt, Gold Coast, which is one of the beautiful place especially for holidays. And then also in the city center, we call it as South Bank, and then Logan campus. We are about 50,000 students spread over all these 5 campuses, and mainly with looking at the engineering, social sciences, medicine, health, and other ICT and other fields. Now, I am based at the Nathan campus. That is the main campus. And you can see that this campus was actually established in 1975. And we have about 13,000 students here. Most of the degrees we offer at this campus is engineering, business, information technology, environment, and aviation. Now, as Tiago has introduced me, so I have been working in this biogas research field for the last 22 years or 25 years. So most of the time I have been in Europe, so like 15 years in Europe, working in Denmark, France, and Finland. And then I moved to Australia in 2014 and started to work here, and I have established my lab and also working on these different processes for biogas and biofuels. So my main research areas, as you can see here, it's mainly organic waste management using the environmental biotechnology approach. So we have the technologies to actually convert any agricultural waste or industrial waste or from sewage treatment plants. All those organic waste can be converted and produced into biofuels like biogas, biohydrogen, and bioethanol. And my expertise is also in not only just producing the biogas, but also using the biogas for energy or vehicle fuel production, especially upgrading or cleaning the biogas and then upgrading it to 92% methane to use it as a vehicle fuel. So, and more recently, we are also looking at the biorefinery, means that all the organic waste that is coming to a biogas plant can be used as a feedstock to produce not just the biofuels, but also high-value chemicals, organic acids, and also fertilizer. And you can see now I just put some couple of current research projects, what we are working on. So the first one is a Australian Renewable Energy Agency funded project. So here we are basically converting the lignocellulosic materials from sugar mills. So this is very popular in Brazil also. So this technology, what we are doing, should be able to apply across the Brazil sugar industry. So we are taking the sugarcane bagasse and the thrash and then converting that into biogas and using that biogas as a vehicle fuel for the transport of the sugar and also the sugarcane from the farms to the mill. So our idea is to replace the diesel consumption in the sugarcane production, transport, and also utilization of the sugar cane for the sugar mill. The other project is called the CRC, Cooperative Research Center, RACE 2030. So here we are actually developing technologies for farm-scale biogas plants and to how to use the agriculture manure or agriculture residues or any other crops that are grown specifically for biogas on the farms can be converted into biomethane and use it on the farm to replace the diesel consumption either in the for irrigation in the pumps or also for the vehicles. Now what you're seeing here on the right is my lab, the biogas reactors in my lab, and this is my pilot scale plant, which I will talk a bit later. Now, here is a farm-scale biogas plant that is basically a kind of a model farm, which can be applied in Brazil. It's not just for the European farm scale. So it's a very interesting story. So this is where I have actually worked when I was in Finland. So this farm has about 40 cows in this barn. Those 40 cows actually produce 2,000 tons of manure, and that is actually stored in this pre-storage tank here. So from here, the manure is fed into the biogas plant. This biogas digester is about 85 cubic meter, and then the gas that is produced is then fed into a combined heat and power plant. And this is about 50 watts combined heat and power plant. So the electricity that is generated and the heat that is generated during the conversion of this biogas is actually used on the farm to heat the farm barn and also to use the electricity for the milking. As I said, that this is a dairy farm. So that means that they are using a lot of electricity for heating the barn and also for milking stations. The electricity is also used by the farmer himself here, and also he is selling to the neighbor. Now the digested material from the biogas reactor will be then going into this post-storage tank here. So you can see that both post-storage tank and the pre-storage tank, they are covered because we want to prevent greenhouse gas emissions from the whole farm. So we actually capture all the gas that is produced during the processing of the materials. Now the digested manure is then used on the fields by using this applicator. So it is spread on the 70 hectares of agricultural land. Now this farmer generally grows cereal crops like oats, barley, and grass. So grass is used for feeding the animals. Oats and barley he was selling in the market. But then after 2 years, we planned that we should use the biogas and then convert into a vehicle fuel. So then we built this biogas upgrading technology. So this is based on the water scrubbing technology. So we use the biogas, clean the biogas, and compress it to 200 bars. And the blue one, what you're seeing here, is the dispenser. So we can actually use the biogas as a vehicle fuel. So this is what we have developed just before I left Finland. I moved to Australia. At that time I was working on this project. So you can see here on the left side is the dispenser where the compressed biogas or biomethane is being filling into the car. On the right side is the tractors. The farm tractors can also be used in the use biogas. So both these vehicles should be a dual fuel vehicles. So that means that you are using petrol in the beginning and then you switch to the biogas. Now coming to this current project, what we call the ARENA project. So this is, you can see that we are converting the sugarcane residues, both sugarcane bagasse and trash, and producing bio-CNG. So this project is working on that we use the sugarcane bagasse and trash, do a hydrothermal pretreatment and steam explosion, and then use the pretreated material for the biogas plant. The biogas that is produced is then cleaned and upgraded to a vehicle fuel, and that is being replacing the transported diesel consumptions in the transport of the cane to the mill. The digested material, instead of going to the fields, we basically convert that into a crude oil and then use it as a diesel also. So this is where we are getting two fuels from the same feedstock, the lignosulfuric biomass. So what our calculations shows that if there is a medium-sized sugar mill, if we can utilize roughly 23% of the sugarcane bagasse, we can actually replace all their diesel consumption for the transport of the cane. This is my pilot scale biogas plant. So this is where we are actually working on the trials to use the sugarcane biomass, so both the sugarcane trash and the biogas. So we have 4 1.2 cubic meter reactors. These are the stainless steel reactors. And then this is the gas storage container. So that's about 20 cubic meter. So the gas that is produced is stored in this biogas storage system and then fed into the biogas upgrading, which is in the container here on the back side. Once the gas is clean and upgraded, it is compressed by the compressor to 200 bars and then bottled into these gas cylinder bottles. Now these bottles can accumulate about 50 liters of bio-CNG, compressed bio-CNG. And these bottles, you can put it in the trunk of your car, and then you can just connect to your fuel injection system. So you can actually use the biogas as your vehicle fuel. Right, so now coming to the dry anaerobic digestion. So what you're seeing here is the anaerobic digestion technology. Now, as you know, anaerobic digestion is a sustainable environmental technology where organic matter like sewage sludge or agriculture manures or even energy crops can be converted into biogas. And this is carried out under anaerobic condition, means that there is no oxygen in the reactors. In the absence of oxygen, the microbes actually utilize this organic waste and produce biogas. Now this biogas is a renewable energy. It contains methane and carbon dioxide, and then you can use this biogas for producing heat, electricity, or both together, or you can also upgrade it to a vehicle fuel. Now the upgrade biogas, we call it as biomethane. You can use this biomethane to inject in your natural gas grid, or you can also use it as a vehicle fuel. So this is a very versatile energy carrier that not only carries the waste management aspects, but also you can actually produce renewable energy and also replace the fossil fuel consumption on a farm or on an industry level. So this is why we say that anaerobic digestion is a sustainable environmental technology because it combines both waste management, renewable energy, nutrient recycling, and also avoids or reduces the greenhouse gas emission. Now, the produced biogas is a CO2 neutral. So that means that you are not adding any more greenhouse gases to the atmosphere during your processing time. Now, AD technology, our anaerobic digestion technologies, we can classify them into two main groups, the wet digestion and the dry digestion. Now, wet digestion is basically carried out when the solid contents or the dry matter content in the feedstock is less than 15%. And this is the most common type of technology that is used in the farm biogas plants. So because a lot of farms, as you saw the first slide, where in Finland the farm, so basically you are actually treating your manure, and the manure has roughly around 10% solids. So this is the most common agriculture biogas plants. They are wet, and they actually treat their own manure and then produce the biogas for their own use. Now, the feedstock suitable can be ranging from sewage sludge or industrial wastewaters and or the agriculture manures. Now, the main advantages of wet fermentation is that the contact between the microbes, the bacteria, and the feedstock is very good, and then you can also distribute the heat uniformly throughout the reactor because there is enough moisture. However, the downside is that the disadvantages are that you need a large reactors because you have a lot of water, and also you have to spend a lot of energy because you are heating a lot of water. So that's the main drawbacks of the wet fermentation or wet AD. But your biogas productions will be really high. Yields will be much higher than the dry anaerobic digestion. Now, the other disadvantage is that you have to the digestate that comes after the biogas process has to be processed. Means that you have to treat the wastewater of coming from the anaerobic digestion process, or you have to separate the digestate into solid liquid fractions so that you can transport the fertilizer valued materials to a different place. On the other hand, if you come to the dry AD, so dry AD actually picked up recently, especially in Germany, when the whole scenario of using the farms to grow energy crops like maize or sorghum and using those feedstocks as a source of energy for producing biogas. Because these feedstocks have really high solid contents, so they are roughly 30 to 90% dry matter. So to actually use them in a conventional biogas reactors, which are mainly CSTR type of reactors, so it is very difficult to pump or mix them in the reactor. So dry fermentation is carried out at 25 to 40% solids, and then you can actually basically reduce the volume of the reactor because you can actually put more biomass into your reactor and operate the reactors at a very high solid contents. And the advantages here is that you have no mixing. You don't need to mix it, so there are no mixing, or the energy required for mixing is not there. And also we don't use so much water, so that means your energy costs and also water costs for water and all these are actually avoided. And there is also no separation of the solid liquid fraction of the digestate, so you can use the digestate as a compost straight away after the process, and then also there is no need of treating the process wastewater because there is no water coming out of this process. Now, the two main disadvantages, it's not like a disadvantage, but if you compare to the wet biogas process, so the true drawbacks are basically that you have to be very careful when operating the dry fermentation reactors because the loading has to be very critical, and also the retention time has to be very critical because there is no adequate contact between the bacteria and these feedstocks or the substrates. So you need to optimize. You have to understand the microbiology and also understand how you can actually increase the contact between the microbes and also avoid the buildup of the intermediate compounds. Now the gas productions, if you compare to the wet and the dry AD, the gas productions for the dry AD will be less than the wet AD. So here are those commercial plants that you can see, and also some of the technologies or the concepts that I will actually describe you now. So on your left, you see a vertical reactor type, a normal wet AD plant, CSTR. On the right side, you have these two plants. So one is the horizontal dry biogas plant. It's called CompoGas, and the top one is the vertical dry AD biogas plant. Now, we need to understand that how we can actually improve the biogas from this dry AD is basically, there are two strategies. The first one is that you have to improve the inoculating efficiency. Means that the contact between the microbes and the feedstocks should be improved. Because if there's no contact, because there's no enough moisture, so the microbes which are in the inoculum or in the sludge has to come in contact with the substrates, otherwise they cannot degrade the materials. So what you have to do is that you have to improve the homogeneity or the mixing of the substrates so that the microbes and the substrates are mixed very well. This can be done either using a biogas, or sometimes you can also use the mechanical mixing. The other strategy that you can use also is to improve the mass transfer. That is how you can actually solubilize the organic matter and how you can actually mix this or solutes in the liquid. So that means that you have to design the reactors in such a way you can actually extract the leachates or the liquid that comes out of the process and then recirculate this back to the reactor so that it will actually percolate through the biomass and then come in contact with the substrates. So these two are the main strategies, and then all the reactor technologies that have been developed are actually based on how to improve the efficiency of the biogas process. Now, the first technology is called the DRANCO. So it's a dry anaerobic composting. As the name says that already, that it is a dry AD process, and also at the same time, at the end of this process, you'll get biogas and a solid fraction that can be used as a compost. Now, this is a very, very interesting technology, and it is very popular in Europe. It was developed by the Belgians. So you can see that it can handle about 20 to 50% solid. So it's a really kind of a high solid side of the biogas process. And then the process water is actually recirculated and used in the process to re-inoculate the incoming fresh feed. Now, what you see here is the most important aspect of this whole concept. So there's a mixer and a pump. Now, the DRANCO process actually performs the mixing of the waste, the fresh feed, and the digestate that is coming from the already degraded material, the digestate coming from the reactor, and using a special pumps. So they basically mix the fresh feed with the digestate and then pump into the reactor, right? So they are very basically a narrow tubes going into the top of the reactor, so that the material is actually pumped to the top of the reactor, and then during this process actually the mixing is actually happening. So once the material reaches to the top of the reactor, so they will fall by gravity. So there is no need of any internal mixing of the material. So they can handle very high solids in that way. So most of this technology is used for the organic fraction of the municipal solid waste. Now the digestate, after the completion of the the process. So the retention time is mainly like a 15 to 30 days. So will be sold as a compost. So it's very straightforward. You don't need to do any post treatment of the digestate. The other technology is called the compo gas technology. So this compo gas technology is based on the horizontal reactor concept. So what you saw earlier was a vertical reactor. Now here is a horizontal tank. So you can see that the materials coming, let's say, organic waste material from the municipal solid waste or any agricultural residues are fed into this horizontal reactor. Now this horizontal reactor steel tank is slowly rotating, so they are basically a mechanical axial mixers are there, so they are slowly rotating and they will assist the material to convey in the forward direction. So it means the material is actually moving from left to the right. Now by the time the solid comes up to here, and so it is actually completely degraded, the process is completed. So it takes roughly around 20 days, the retention time, and then the finished digestates are recycled to inoculate the incoming fresh waste. And then you can actually, you see the biogas production, so they can actually are much higher compared to the Dranker process. So you can achieve about 110 to 130 cubic meters per ton of material. Now, Beacon is the more recent concept. So this takes the second strategy that was used to improve. So what is this doing is that it is using like a garage system. So if you imagine your car garage, so it has a kind of a door, and then the materials are, so the whole garage is filled with the biomass. So you can see that this is all lignocellulosic materials. And then you have a door here. So that is basically a kind of a pneumatic door. So when the door opens, just like your garage door, so the front loader tractor will comes in and dumps all the material into this garage. Now, after this, so all these walls and the floor are actually heated. So it will maintain the optimum temperature required for the digestion of the material. Now, during this degradation process, the biomass will actually, what do you call, the hydrolysis and produce the leachate or the liquid. Now, that liquid is stored in a separate container and then used to recirculate and re-inoculate the biomass. So you can see all the blue lines. So basically, that is the leachate that is produced is actually collected by this slanting floor, and then it's stored in this tank, and then it's fed over by the sprinklers will be spread over the biomass. The gas that is produced is then collected and used for producing heat and electricity. So this is a kind of a concept that they have developed, and it is now very popular in Europe, and also we are planning to use it in Australia. And you can see the increase in the biogas yield, so you can go up to 180 cubic meters of biogas per ton of material. Now, the last concept is what we are looking at is the food and beverage industry. So food waste is like, it looks like a solid in the beginning, right? But during the AD process, because it contains 90% of water, so it will hydrolyze and becomes so liquefied. It becomes so liquid. So it's a combination of dry fermentation, so that's basically your compo gas or horizontal reactor, and a wet digestion reactor here. So you have a combination of these two. So they actually do the co-fermentation, means co-digestion of the food waste with other agricultural waste, and then once the material is actually degrading, the food waste, which is basically very rich in water, will provide enough water and moist the water for the degradation of the agricultural waste, like manure, and then the digestate is then fed into the wet fermentation reactor, where you continue the fermentation process. So these are the four different types of concepts. At the end of the day, it's all the same. So the produced biogas will then go into a combined heat and power plant and produce the electricity, and that is fed into the local community. And the process heat can be used in the heating the reactors, or you can also send it to the district heating. Now, coming to the research that we are doing in the high solid AD space is, so we have been doing a couple of research, a couple of years we have been working on dry fermentation, and then Tiago came to Griffith, so he has worked for 1 year with us, and he has done a lot of work, and I will present some of our collaboration with Federal University of Technology, Parana, where Tiago is working now. So you can see here that we took the sugarcane bagasse as our feedstock, and you can see the solid content on the top is about 83%. So it's very, very dry. Now, when you use this kind of material in a conventional reactors, agricultural biogas reactors, so you will find it is very difficult to feed. Like in the first instance, you can't feed. This is very kind of a dry, and the bulk density is not like a manures or sewage sludge, so it's very difficult to pump. It's not a pumpable material, and if you mix it with water, it will settle so quickly. So it's very difficult to feed. So we thought that, okay, dry fermentation of this kind of materials, or any agricultural materials like energy crops or straw or bagasse would be the ideal option. So here are the batch systems where we can put the materials, and we have studied how we can increase the solid contents. What would be the ideal solid content in a biogas reactors? So we have taken 10% solids, 15% solids, and 20% solids of these materials. And you can see very clearly the gas productions. So as I said, that the most important thing for this biogas process to happen is that the bacteria come in contact with the material. If there is no contact, the bacteria cannot degrade the organic matter. Now, to happen this, you have to have moisture. So the higher the water content in the bottles or the assays or the reactors, the higher the contact, or the better the contact, and more the efficiency of the biogas production. So on your left is what you call the solid content. So you see the red lines is the methane production. So all these are the methane production over a period of time. So we have actually operated the reactors for a very, very long time. Now there are four different types of solid contents, and then also we have 3 different types of solid contents and 4 different of substrates loading. How much load compared to the inoculum or the bacteria. Now this is the red line is the 10% solids. The blue line is the 15% solids. So this is 15% solids, and then this here is the 20% solids. Okay, 10, 15, and 20% solids, and then you have the 3-4 colors. These are basically the solid loading. Now, when we say if you have a higher solids, means the higher amount of biomass in the reactor. That means the contact between the material and the bacteria is less. So you are expecting low biogas production. Now, in the first instance, you see that we have a very high gas production because we have less loading. So the contact between the bacteria and the inoculum is much better. So the gas productions are higher at a loading. So that is basically at a 10% loading. And when you have the same amount of material and the bacteria on the organic matter basis, you see highest gas production. Now, why the gas production is varying is because the the methane concentration evolution of the methane is also changing with the amount of substrates you add. So here what you see the biogas yields. So a 10% loading, 15% loading, and 20% loading. So this is what we call it as the solid state dry fermentation. Now the 10% is your wet AD. The 15% is between these two. So we want to see what is the optimal loading for this kind of substrate. Now, of course, as you increase the amount of substrate to the inoculum amount, so it means that if you are adding more biomass to same amount of bacterial culture, you will see that with increase in the amount of substrate, you reduce the biogas production because there is not enough contact between the bacteria and the substrate or the materials. So the biogas production actually decreases with increase in the solid amount. And it happens for all the three types of fermentation. Right? Now, interestingly, the last one is the dry fermentation. So you can see that methane yields are much, much higher or equal to the wet fermentation here. Okay, so they are more or less same. Now, when it comes to the methane yields on ton of basis, okay, if you have a ton of biogas, how much biogas or biomethane you can actually produce. So you will see, of course, the productivity should be higher for the dry fermentation compared to the wet fermentation. And you can see the methane content. Okay, so with increase in the solid or the loading, you can see that the methane concentration is actually decreasing. And that's because there's no contact between. And you will see more carbon dioxide evolution compared to the methane evolution. Now, once the reactors, the experiment is completed, we will try to understand how much organic matter has actually converted into biogas. And this is what you can see, that the assays, which are having only 10% of the solids, have a higher organic matter conversion efficiency compared to the assays in the dry fermentation. And this is obvious because we don't have enough water in the dry fermentation reactors, so there's no contact between the bacteria and the substrate. But when we calculate the amount of biogas that is produced per liter of the reactor, that is called the volumetric methane yields. So you will see that the dry fermentation will have much, much higher productivity. That is that if you put 1 cubic meter of biomass, you will produce more biogas than if you put same amount of biogas, volumetric biomass in a wet system. So this is the main advantage why it is more economical for farmers or any industry working in the agricultural residues to go for the dry fermentation, because you have less energy costs, you use a less amount of reactor volume, means that the cost for fabricating a reactor is also less, and there are no mechanical mixers, so means the electricity for mixing is reduced. So, and also your productivity, that is the amount of biogas that is produced per unit volume of reactor, you have much higher than the wet fermentation. Then we have to understand why it is happening that the dry fermentation methane yields are less than the wet fermentation methane yields. So, and then we can see that it's mainly because the bacterial culture or the microbiology in the reactors actually changes, and that reflects on the amount of moisture or water that is present in the reactor. Now, this slide shows that how the microbiology or the bacteria changes after 25 days of the process. So before, if you take a sample during the 20 days time, and then after the 20 days of the process, if you take the sample again and if you look it under the microscope, you will see that the number of microbes which are actually present before and after this 20 days will actually completely different from the before and after the process. And also this will change with increase in the solid levels, solid contents. And that is for our more microbiology understanding and how we can actually design the biogas process and actually kind of develop strategies to actually increase the contact between the microbes. So as you can see here, with increase in the solid content, there will be a different amount of organic acids, right? So during the biogas process, all the organic matter will be solubilized during the hydrolysis and acidogenesis phases, the two phases of the biogas process, and then they will produce organic acids. Now these organic acids are the precursors, means that they are the substrates for the methanogenic bacteria, which is actually converting these organic acids into methane and carbon dioxide. Now these methanogenic bacteria, they are very slow and they are very sensitive to any process change. So they cannot kind of adapt to the conditions where there's not enough moisture or there's not enough contact with the substrate, or there is change in the pH or ammonia accumulation. So most of the processes where the solid contents are higher, you will see accumulation of the organic matter. And this acetic acid, for instance, cannot be removed so quickly because there is no mass transfer between these solutes and the bacteria. So they will be accumulating in the reactor, thereby they will inhibit. So we took samples between the day 24 and day 45 and try to see the concentration of these different organic acids. And we can see that there is accumulation of propionic acid during the initial phases, but then that is converted by in the later stages when the solid content is very low. On the other hand, if you take a very high solids, like 30 or 25% solids, you will see there's accumulation of propionic acid and butyric acid during the initial stages itself. And then this cannot be degraded later on. So that's our understanding that we need to recirculate the leachate that is produced from the reactors and then feed it back onto the substrates, like how the beacon technology is actually working on. Okay, I stop with this my presentation. So we have actually completed my time. So if you have any questions, please ask me and I will explain much more detail. Thank you very much for listening to the presentation.
Thank you very much, Professor Prasad, for the very interesting presentation. During your presentation, we had a couple of questions. I will kindly ask you to check your WhatsApp because I sent you the questions. So we have first questions there. You can read the questions first, and then you can answer, please.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for your questions, and I'm really glad that you are listening. So the first question is, the bagasse for anaerobic digestion need to be pre-treated first. So the question is that do you need to pre-treat the bagasse before actually feeding, and what is the pre-treatment? So now if you go back to my pilot scale plant, for example, what we are doing, I can show you. So what we are doing here, we have tested two different types of pre-treatment. So the first one is the steam explosion. So it's around 130 degrees Celsius for 10 minutes. So what we do is that we bring in the bagasse or trash, and then we add 1 to 3 of water. So 1 kilo of material and 3 liters of water. So that's the ratio we maintain. And then we put it in a reactor, a steam explosion reactor. So we operate it at around 130 degrees Celsius for 20 minutes. Once the pressure inside the reactor is like 20 bars, And after the time of 20 minutes, we will release this pressure. And then due to this sudden release of 20 bars to 1 atmospheric pressure, the whole biomass will explode. Means that the cell structure is actually completely broken. So this will increase the access of the bacteria to the substrates. Okay, I hope I answered that. We can also use chemicals also for the pretreatment. So among the chemicals, the alkaline pretreatment, sodium hydroxide at 4% on for dry matter. Okay, so if you have 4 grams of sodium hydroxide for 100 grams of dry matter of biomass, and you actually keep it at 50 degrees Celsius for 24 hours, and that's the second pretreatment we have tested. And those two, out of these two, we are going with the steam explosion.
Thank you, Prasad. We're going to the second question now.
Second question. Is it possible to use vinasse together with bagasse? Yes. Now, so vinasse is, depending on your market value, you can use as a co-substrate, because in Australia, vinasse is going straight as an animal feed. So they get more money than for a biogas, but you can mix the vinasse with the bagasse, so it helps actually improving the nutrient values, because when you are using the feedstocks, you have to look at the carbon-nitrogen ratio. Now, the carbon-nitrogen ratio should be optimal at 20:30:1. Okay, and let's say 30 carbon and 1 nitrogen. That is the ratio. So if you are using sugarcane bagasse, which has carbon of 100, okay, so if you see my slide, okay, so this ratio, the carbon-nitrogen ratio is around 100. So you need to bring that down to 30 or less. So then you can actually improve the degradation of the process. And it is yes, you can use the vinasse as a co-substrate with the bagasse. So you need to find out the optimal ratio. What is the CapEx for this AD dry technology? So the associated OpEx. Now, coming to the cost, I'm taking the same reactor volume. Okay, if you have a 5,000 cubic meter reactor of wet AD process, it will cost you around 26 to 32 million Australian dollars. Okay, Thiago, maybe you should convert that into your local, right? Okay. On the other hand, if you have a wet, dry anaerobic digestion, the same reactor volume of 5,000 cubic meter, you will spend only 16 million Australian dollars. So it's almost 50%. So the whole CapEx.
Mais ou menos 45, 50 milhões de reais. Okay.
Right? Then
you can
question. Yeah. So the operation costs, you just need one person to operate the biogas plant technically. So it's his own salary, that is your running cost. But then you need to think that if you are bringing materials from outside into your plant, then there can be some gate fees. Means that when somebody is sending his waste to you instead of sending it to the landfill, so he has to pay at least some part of the money that he has to pay if he is sending it to the landfill. So if you are sending 1 ton of material to landfill, you pay $40 per ton of material in Australia. But if you're sending the same material to your biogas plant to treat your waste or use it for biogas production, we are asking him to pay at least $30 per ton of waste. So this is your revenue. So you can generate money. So there are two ways to make biogas as a feasible, is to get the gate fees, money for your taking the waste from other industries, and also selling the biogas to the grid. Okay, so those are two.
Thank you, Prasad. We have a couple of times, so let's move to question number 4.
Question 4. Yeah. Could co-digestion between lignocellulosic substrate and liquid substrates be better in terms of biogas production? balance of solids and stability when compared to dry fermentation. Now, co-digestion can happen in both technologies, whether it's wet or dry fermentation. Now, the co-digestion, you have to think that co-digestion is to bring materials which are rich in carbon and which are rich in nitrogen. If you are only doing biogas process with materials which are rich in carbon only, like bagasse, you don't have enough nitrogen in the process, so you don't get the full potential of the biogas from the substrate. But if you mix sugarcane, bagasse, and materials which are rich in nitrogen, like manure, so you actually improve the biogas production because the carbon to nitrogen ratio is now well balanced, so you will actually improve the biogas production. Whether it's AD or wet fermentation, it's the same. Co-digestion technology is for both. Now, between AD and wet is the amount of moisture that will decide, because if you have less water, that means the contact between the bacteria and this substrate is like inadequate, so you will not have the mass transfer. Question 5.
Okay.
How does the irrigation system of the inoculum works? What are the limits and good practices for not being the wet digestion in the garage system? Now, you actually, when in the beacon process, so you initially, let's say you fill up the garage with the biomass, and then you have a ratio. So if you put 10 kilos of material, you have 1 liter of water. In the beginning, you will decide this ratio to achieve the solid contents of the 20% or 30%. Okay, so that is the deciding factor. So you want to decide. So if you take a bagasse, it is like 89% solid. So you want to bring it, that solid content, to a certain level, right? 30% solids. So you are adding water, enough water, to bring the solid content to 30%. And that is the amount of water that you will use for recycling or the percolation and recycling on the biomass.
Thank you, Prasad. We have a couple more minutes, so let's move to question number.
Question number 6. How much energy in terms of energy production a dry reactor consumes? So because all the reactors, you can see, they actually need heating. Okay, so because we want to maintain the temperature of the reactors either at a mesophilic temperature, that is 35 to 37 degrees Celsius, or at thermophilic, that is at 55 degrees Celsius. So you will use some of your energy, the produced biogas, for heating the reactors, and also the electricity that you have produced will also be used for mixing, pumping, and all those things. In a wet fermentation, you will actually use 15 to 20% of the produced biogas for your own use. Okay, and in the dry fermentation, because there is not so much of mixing, but still heating is there, so you will use around half of that.
Thank you, Prasad. For the last question, we have question number 7 from Professor Ayrton Kunz. He's also professor from our biogas course. So this is going to be the last question, okay?
Yeah, thank you. So the question is that when we operate the reactor in solid phase, depending on the substrate used, we may have problems of inhibition of the process. Example, ammonia and H2S, which decreases the methane yield. How to compensate for this? Now, if we are doing dry anaerobic digestion, okay, I'm thinking that this question is for dry fermentation. So if you are thinking the dry fermentation of manure, like chicken manure, which is very high in protein content or nitrogen, so that is the main issue. You will have definitely ammonia accumulation. Now, this is a kind of classical example where the dry fermentation of manures is actually inhibiting the process, because the high solid contents may slow the mass transfer and thereby the slowing the decomposition or degradation of the intermediate compounds. So the proteins have to be converted into the ammonium and then amino acids, But this will not be happening because of the limited amount of the mass transfer. So thereby the accumulation of the ammonia in the reactor happens. Thereby it will reduce the methane production. Now the one way we say is that you actually either strip the ammonia. Okay, so you either strip the ammonia before or in situ, means in the same reactor itself, you can strip the ammonia. So, and then if you remove the ammonia, so you can actually reduce or lower the amount of ammonia production during the AD process.
Okay, thank you very
Right.
much, Prasad, for your time here. It was really nice to have you here with us. It's almost 9 p.m. here in Brazil.
Yeah.
So now that you are introduced to the country, we are expecting you to come here for a short visit, maybe.
Yes. Thank you very much. It'll be a good adventure also. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of industry has been developed in the biogas, and if there is any market for vehicle fuels from biogas also, apart from heat and electricity generation.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and thank you everyone for listening to my presentation. And you can see my contact details are there, so you can either contact Tiago, or you can also write to me if you have any questions. Thank you very much. See you then.
Thank you, Prasad. Bom, pessoal, essa foi a fala do professor Prasad. Espero que vocês tenham gostado, tenham aproveitado. Vale lembrar que a gente vai fazer a inserção das legendas e em até no máximo 2 dias esse vídeo vai ser atualizado com a inserção das legendas. Também gostaria de lembrar o webinar da próxima semana com a professora Triolo, que vai falar sobre codigestão, estratégias de codigestão para aumentar a eficiência da produção de biogás. Também não lembro se eu comentei, mas nós submetemos um projeto com o professor Prasad e o governo da Austrália. Temos a intenção de trazê-lo, obviamente, quando a pandemia do Covid passar. Temos a intenção de trazê-lo para um curso que deve acontecer tanto em Foz quanto em Curitiba, um curso aí de 3, 4 dias. Nós submetemos o projeto em parceria com a UTFPR, o CIBiogás e o Conselho de Pesquisa da Austrália. Então, provavelmente, para o próximo ano, teremos aí a visita do professor Prasad no Brasil. Gostaria de agradecer a presença de vocês. Já são 9 horas, tivemos aí uma alteração por causa do fuso horário lá da Austrália. Na semana que vem, na quarta-feira, então, voltamos com a programação normal. Também a professora Triolo fará a apresentação em inglês, a gente vai promover depois as legendas. E aí, em função do fuso, voltamos para o horário normal às 10 horas da manhã. Tá bom? Muito obrigado a todos, boa noite.